which is being conducted in hosted in association with MG University School of Minority Studies by ICAI Ernakulam branch. It's organized by Inter-Tax Committee of ICAI. The first day we had a supply concept, taxable, non-taxable, all those things, the basics of GST, which is taken by C.A. Shankar Narayanan sir. Again, on the second day, we had a levy and collection of tax, reverse charge mechanism and GST and composition levy, again by C.A. Shankar Narayanan sir. And I'm quite sure the last 2 days sessions were excellently received by all the participants who were here. And we have to go for 3 more days without considering today. Today it is time of supply, value of taxable supply, and place of supply, all those concepts which being taken by Cyrjoe is from Ernakulam. And it's my pleasure today to welcome the faculty today, one of the experienced faculty in GST, CA, Cyrjoe V.J, to this function. Welcome, Cyrjoe, please. It's also my pleasure to welcome each and every one of the participants here today. And I'm quite sure you are enjoying, or you might be really experiencing a different feature through this GST workshop. I request you to make your comments or anything in the WhatsApp group or even here itself. If you find any difficulty in all these concepts which presented by the very, very valuable and very expert faculties here today. We are expecting in the coming days Atul Kumar Gupta sir or RK sir, who is the committee chairman and the past president, Atul Kumar sir also taking some valuable inputs or giving some valuable inputs to each and every one of you. So I am welcoming each and every one of you to this seminar, particularly Sajmohan sir and Sulaiman sir, and I don't know whether CV Secretary sir is here or not. I think welcoming each and every one of you to this seminar. Thank you very much, and you have a wonderful time here today. Over to Alan, please.
Thank you, Master. Before we commence the session, I'd like to introduce our speaker for the day, Cyrjoe V.J, sir. He has 20 years of experience and practice as a chartered accountant. His office is based out of Cochin. He has successfully completed the certification course on indirect taxes conducted by the Indirect Taxes Committee of the ICAI. He's also a member of the study group on indirect taxes in Kerala. It's formed by the Indirect Tax Committee of ICAI. He's also participated as a trainer in the training program and is presently a faculty member of the Indirect Tax Committee. He's also got substantial experience in training various professionals, and he's also presented papers and classes at various occasions. It's my honor to introduce you, Cyrjoe sir. So please commence the session whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, CA Alan, and thank you, CA Roy sir, for all the good words. And good afternoon to all the participants. Let me share the document first. Able to see the document?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon to all the teachers. It is really a pleasure for me to interact with you all, because teachers is a class of people whom I respect the most. You are doing a very noble profession. I also thank CA Institute as well as the MG University for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. Today, our topic of discussion is time and place of supply. Before going into that subject, let me take a certain definitions, I think, which is very relevant for the topic. First of all, continuous supply of goods. Continuous supply of goods means a supply of goods which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on a recurrent basis under a contract, whether or not by means of wire or cable or pipeline or any other conduit, and for which a supplier invoices the recipient on a regular or periodic basis. And certain other notified transactions shall also not be considered as continuous supply if so notified by the government. See, what is this continuous supply? Supply of goods which is provided, two conditions are to be satisfied. Supply of goods which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on recurrent basis, and for which a supplier invoices the recipient on a regular or periodic basis. If these two conditions are satisfied, then it is called a continuous supply. For example, assume that there is an agreement, there is a contract for supplying brick to a builder in a continuous manner. Every day or twice in a week, the required quantity of bricks shall be supplied by a particular person. There is a contract for that. And bills shall be, invoices shall be raised on a periodic basis. This is a continuous supply of, example for a continuous supply of goods. Similarly, there is continuous supply of service also. Which is defined as supply of services which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on recurrent basis under a contract for a period exceeding 3 months. And again with the periodic payment obligations, and the other, government has the power to notify certain supplies as continuous supply of services also, if so notified by the government. Here again two conditions. Continuous supply of service means supply of services which is provided continuously or on recurrent basis. Can you give an example with a periodic payment obligation? Can you give an example? Example, construction activity which is for a period of more than, which may last for a period of more than 3 months. That is a continuous supply of service. Another, the telephone service or internet service provided by a telecommunication company. Periodic basis, monthly basis, invoices shall be raised. Services shall be provided on a continuous basis. This is another example for continuous supply of services. Okay. Now, before going into time of supply, let us see what is the time limit for issue of tax invoice. tax invoices are to be issued for a supply. For every supply, there is a requirement to issue invoices, tax invoices. What is the time limit within which such a tax invoices are to be issued? That is what we are going to look. So different provisions are there for supply of goods and supply of services. In the case of supply of goods, a registered person supplying taxable goods, and supply involves movement of goods. Time limit for issue of invoice is before or at the time of removal of goods for supply to the recipient. So any registered person who is supplying some taxable goods, and such a supply involves movement of goods. In pursuance of that supply, there is movement of goods from one place to another place. If so, invoice is required to be issued at the time of removal of such goods or before such a removal. Similarly, if there is no movement of goods in pursuance of such a supply, goods are remaining there itself. In that situation, before or at the time of delivery of goods or making available thereof to the recipient, goods are when the goods are made available to the recipient, at that time or before that, invoices are to be issued. So in the case of goods, invoices are required to be issued before the delivery or before the removal. Okay, you cannot defer it after the delivery or after the removal of such goods. It is to be, invoices are to be issued before that or at that time of removal. In the case of continuous supply of goods, we have already seen what is the meaning of this continuous supply. In the case of continuous supply of goods, where successive statement of accounts or successive payments are involved, payments are to be given or statements are issued in the midst of this, during the period of this transaction. Then before or at the time each such statement is issued or before the payment is received, invoice is required to be issued. Okay. So in the example that we have seen earlier, supplying bricks to a builder, there is an agreement for supplying bricks to a builder for the next 6 months in a continuous manner, every week twice or thrice. On a monthly basis, the statement regarding the supply of goods or delivery of goods is issued, or payment is also to be received on a monthly basis. Before such a payment or at the time of such a payment or such a statement is given, at that time or before that, invoice is to be issued. This is the provision of regarding the issue of invoice in the case of continuous supply of goods. Now, if goods are sent on approval for sale or return basis, this is a situation where the goods are sent, A send goods to B for the purpose of supply, for the purpose of sale, but the sale will be made effective only after B inspecting the goods and approve it. So we require a certain quality of the goods. So he has to inspect it, approve it. Only after such inspection and approval, sales will take place. So in this situation, invoices is to be issued. Invoices is to be issued at the time of supply or 6 months from the date of removal, whichever is earlier. What is the relevance of the 6 months? Assume that A has sent goods to B. Now B has to inspect it and approve it. He has the time limit up to 6 months to approve it. Assume he approves the goods after 2 months. So sale takes place at that time. Supply, the time of supply is at that time when B approves it. So invoice is to be issued immediately after the goods are approved by B. And you assume B is not approving the goods, he is keeping it pending. Even after 6 months, it is no decision has been intimated to A. Then at the elapse of the period of 6 months, A is required to issue an invoice. That means sales takes place. Supply happens at the elapse of 6 months. So invoice is to be issued before or at the time of supply or 6 months from the date of removal, whichever comes earlier. What will happen if after 6 months, say, the 7th month goods are returned? Then without A is not approving the quality of the goods. So what will happen? Supply has already taken place at the end of the 6 months period. Now if we want to, if we want to return the goods, then it is only a sales return. That is the situation. So invoice is to be issued at the time of supply or 6 months from the date of removal, whichever comes earlier. This is the provision regarding the issue of invoice in the case of supply of goods. In the case of supply of services, a registered person supplying taxable service has to issue the invoice before or after the provision of service, but within a prescribed period. So, in the case of goods, invoice is to be issued before the removal or at the time of removal, at the time of delivery or before the time of delivery. But in the case of services, you have a further time limit. It may be issued before or after the provision of service, but within a prescribed period. What is this prescribed period? Prescribed period is 30 days from the date of supply of service. So you have the time limit of 30 days after the rendering of the service to issue invoice. In the case of banking company, non-banking finance company, or other financial institutions, the time limit is 45 days from the date of supply of service. In all other cases, it is 30 days from the date of supply of service. So this is the time limit for issue of tax invoice. Once the services are rendered, you have to issue the invoice within a period of 30 or 45 days, as the case may be. Now, in the case of continuous supply of service, where the due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract on or before the due date of payment. The example that we have considered earlier, for example, assume a rent agreement is there. For a period of 11 months, a premises is being given on lease on rent. Every month, an invoice is, every month a payment is to be paid. Monthly payment, the next, after the completion of a month, next, before the 10th of the next month, the payment is to be made. This is the requirement as per the agreement, the rent agreement. If so, that is the due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract. In this section, the due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract. Invoice is to be issued before the due date of payment. Before 10th of the next month, invoice is required to be issued. Where the due date of payment is not ascertainable from the contract, before or at the time when the supplier of service receives the payment, No time limit is prescribed in the rent agreement. There is not a clause like before the 10th of the next month the payment is to be given or nothing like that. No such provision is there. And the due date of payment is not ascertainable from the contract. In that situation, if any payment is received before the or at the time of receipt of the payment, invoice is to be issued. Clear? And there may be some situations where the payment is linked to completion of an event. For example, in the case of a builder who is providing the construction service, which is a continuous service if it is lasts for a period of more than 3 months, as per the definition of continuous supply of service, assume that payment is to be given at certain stages. And when the basement is over, certain percentage of the money to be paid. At the lintel level, another installment of payment is to be paid. After the first floor is completed, etc. Payment is linked to the completion of certain events. In that case, on or before the due date of payment. Payment is linked to certain completion of an event before or at the due date of payment, invoice is to be issued. This is the provisions regarding the supply of invoice in the case of continuous supply of goods. Now, residue of goods or services from unregistered person where RCM is applicable. You have seen as earlier what is RCM, that is reverse charge mechanism. In case of notified goods and notified services, the liability to pay tax is not on the person who is making the supply, but on the person who is receiving the supply. So, assume that in the case of a in the case of a reverse charge mechanism, by a reverse charge mechanism, tax is to be payable by the recipient, and the goods or services, the goods is received or services are received from an unregistered person. It's possible. For example, in the case of a GTA, or in the case of a advocate, or from any other person, some services are received or some goods are received where RCM is applicable from an unregistered person. In that case, the registered person who is liable to pay tax under section 9.3 or 9.4, if he receives goods or services both from an unregistered person, on the date of receipt of such a goods or service or both, has to raise an invoice. Here it is not the person who is making the supply raise the invoice, but the person who received the goods or services from an unregistered person has to raise an invoice, tax invoice. The time limit is on the date of receipt of such goods or services. Clear? So, the RCM may be, the goods or services may be received either from a registered person or from an unregistered person. If the goods or services are received on which a tax is payable under section 9.3 or 9.4 under RCM, if the goods or services are received from a registered person, you will get an invoice, no problem. You need not issue any invoice. But if you receive it from an unregistered person, that unregistered person will not give you any tax invoice because he is not registered. He is not empowered to give tax invoice to you. So, you have to give a tax invoice to them in that situation. When, what is the due date? On the date of receipt of such a goods or service. Okay. Now, Now let us come to the time of supply. If you look into section 9, which you have already seen yesterday or day before yesterday, section 9 speaks about a levy. It says that there shall be levied a tax called CGST, SGST, IGST, whatever be that, on supply of goods and services or both, etc. So this is the charging section, section 9. Section 9 says that when goods or services are supplied, a tax called SGST or CGST or IGST, whatever be that, shall be charged. And what is the meaning of supply? You have seen in section 7. Okay. Go to section 7 was saying 719, the general provision. Then we have 71B, C, all those things are there. All forms of supply such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, lease, rental, etc. of goods or services made or agreed to be made for a consideration, etc., etc. There was the word made or agreed to be made. Supply such as various forms of such supply such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, etc. made or agreed to be made. What it means? Even if the goods or services are not supplied, but there is only an agreement to supply, deliver. It is not delivered, or services are not rendered. Goods are not delivered, or services are not rendered, but there is an agreement to supply goods or render service. That is supply. When you enter into the agreement itself, supply happens. That is what section 7 says, isn't it? And section 9 says that if there is a supply, there is a tax. Charging section 9 says that if there is a supply, you have to pay SGST, CGST or IGST, whatever be that. Does it mean that when there is a contract to supply something, when you are entering into an agreement to render service, or when you are entering into an agreement to supply some goods, you have to pay tax? Is it so? Section 9 has an extension, actually. Section 12 and 13. Section 12 subsection 1 and 13 subsection 1 says that liability to pay tax on goods shall, in the case of section 12.1, it says that liability to pay tax on goods shall arise at the time of supply, as determined in accordance with the provisions of this section. So, until and unless the time of supply arises, the liability to pay tax on supply of goods is not there. Even though supply happens under section 7, levy is there under section 9, the liability to pay tax arises at the time of supply. So that is the importance of time of supply. So each transaction, what is time of supply? It is to be determined in accordance with the provisions of this section. This section means section 12 in the case of goods. A similar provision is there in section 13.1 also. It says that the liability to pay tax on services shall arise at the time of supply as determined in accordance with the provisions of this section. So, time of supply as far as goods is concerned is to be determined on the basis of section 12, and the liability to pay tax arises only on that time of supply. Hope it is clear. And now we comes to the time of supply of goods, where supplier is liable to pay tax. What is the other side? In certain situations, the recipient may be liable to pay tax. But now we are taking into consideration the situation where the supplier is liable to pay tax. The type of supply of goods where the supplier is liable to pay tax shall be earliest of the following dates. 1. The date of issue of invoice. 2. The last date on which the supplier is required to issue the invoice. And 3. The date on which the supplier receives the payment. Whichever is the earliest of these 3. The date of issue of invoice. The time of supply will arise on the date of issue of invoice. So, okay, no problem. I'm not going to issue the invoice. In that case, I need not pay tax. Is it so? No. The last date on which the supplier is required to issue the invoice. That is another yardstick. In the case of goods, normally what is the rate of tax? What is the last date on which you have to issue the invoice? The date of delivery, or the date of removal of goods, or the date on which the goods are made available to the recipient. You can issue the invoice any day before that, or the date on which the supplier receives the payment, whichever comes earlier. These are the 3 yardsticks based on which the time of supply in the case of supply of goods is to be determined. But there is a notification number 66/2017, Central Tax, dated 15/11/2017, by which this notification says that the 3rd yardstick, that is the date on which the supplier receives the payment, is not applicable, is withdrawn, is not taken into consideration. So, in the case of supply of goods, the time of supply as of now is to be determined on the basis of 2 yardsticks only. The first one, the date of issue of invoice, and the second one, the last date on which the supplier is required to issue the invoice. What is the last date on which the supplier is required to issue the invoice in different situations? What is it? We have already seen. Whichever comes earlier, that is the time of supply, and when time of supply arises, the liability to pay tax also arises. And in the case of RCM, where recipient is liable to pay tax under RCM, time of supply shall be earliest of the following dates. 1. The date of receipt of goods. 2. The date on which a payment is made. And 3. The date immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of invoice by the supplier. Whichever comes earlier. The first one, the date of, so in this situation, in the case of RCM, that is reverse charge mechanism, the recipient of goods is liable to pay the tax. We are looking from the perspective of the recipient. In this case, we are looking things from the perspective of the recipient. In the other way, the first case, we have been seeing things from the perspective of the supplier. So, the date on which the invoice is required to be issued, or the date on which is invoice is issued from the perspective of the supplier. Now, we are in the other side. So, we know the date on which we have received the goods. So, the date on which the goods are received, we have given the payment. So, the date on which the payment is made, or if these two is not at arrived, goods are not received, the payment is not made, but the invoices are raised by the other party. Invoices are raised by the other party. means the other party was a registered person. So he has issued a tax invoice. So we didn't receive the goods and we didn't make any payments. The date immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of the invoice by the supplier, we are liable to pay tax on RCM basis. So of these three, whichever of these comes earlier, the time of supply arises on that date. And the date of payment means the date of payment entered in the books of accounts of the recipient or the date on which the payment is debited to his bank account, whichever is earlier. An explanation is there. And where it is not possible to determine the time of supply as above, time of supply shall be the date of entry in the books of accounts of the recipient of supply. Now, time of supply of goods where interest, late fee and penalty is applicable. What is this? As far as the goods is concerned, assume that there is a contract to supply goods and goods are supplied against which payment is to be made within 10 days as per the contract. And there is a particular time in the contract which says that if payment is not given within 10 days of the delivery of goods or the invoice date, interest at the rate of 10% is to be paid. Now, payment could not be paid within the stipulated time limit. So, interest is paid. Is GST applicable or is the amount of interest forms part of supply? That is the first question. Answer is, it is supply. It is part of supply. It is not a separate supply, but it forms part of the original supply of goods. The value of the original supply of goods shall constitute the price mentioned in the invoice as well as the excess amount to be given as interest. So interest portion also constitute the value of the supply of goods. For example, the value of the goods is 10,000 rupees. For belated payment, another 500 rupees is also to be paid. So in total, 10,500 rupees is given. Now, what is the time of supply for this interest? This is additional value of supply by way of interest, late fee or penalty for delayed payment of any consideration. Same time of supply will be the date on which the supplier receives such addition in value. So as far as the 10,000 rupees is concerned, what is the time of supply? The date on which the invoices are issued. Okay. So assume the 5th of that month 1, 5th of month 1, invoices were raised and goods are delivered. 10,000 rupees. Payment is given only after 2 months. Now, actually, what is the value of the supply of goods now? It's actually 10,500. That is the total value of supply of goods. Out of this 10,000, the time of supply is the 5th of month 1, on which date invoice is raised. And regarding the other 500 rupees, which is given as value of interest, the time of supply arises only on the date on which such a addition amount, such 500 rupees is received by the person, by the registered person. He received it only after 2 months. So he need to pay tax on 500 rupees only on the date on which he received the interest amount. His liability to pay the GST on the interest portion arises only on the date on which he received the amount. This is the provision regarding the interest, time of supply in respect of interest, late fee and penalty is concerned. Now let us come to the time of supply of services. Where supplier is liable to pay tax, time of supply of services where supplier is liable to tax, if the invoice is issued within the prescribed time limit, yes, invoice is issued within the prescribed time limit, then the time of supply shall be the date of invoice or the date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. And if the invoice is not issued within the prescribed time limit, then the time of supply shall be the date of provision of service or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Now consider a situation where services are rendered on 20th of month 1. Now what is the time limit to issue invoices in respect of this? 19th of month 2. 30 days. 30 days from the date of rendering of service. So invoice is to be issued before 19th of month 2. Assume the invoices are issued on 15th of month 2 and payment is received on 1st of month 3. What is the time of supply? What is the time of supply? Time of supply in this case is date of invoice, because since the invoice is issued within the prescribed time limit, the date of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Here the date of invoice happens on 15th of month 2. So time of supply is 15th of month 2. Now assume that advance amount has been received on month 1, 10th of month 1. Services are rendered on 20th of month 1. Invoices are raised 15th of month 1. What is the time of supply? Time of supply is, here again invoice is issued within the time limit. So the time of supply is date of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Here the date of receipt of payment is the earlier one, that is the 10th of month 1. So that is the time of supply. Now I assume the situation, invoices are raised on, services are rendered on 20th of month 1. Invoices are raised on 21st of month 2. And payment is received on 10th of month 3. What is the time of supply? Here the invoices are not issued within the prescribed time limit. So what will happen? The time of supply will be the date of provision of service or the date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. We go back. We have been waiting till 19th of the month 2. If invoices have been issued within 19th of month 2, the date on which the invoices was raised would have been the time of supply. But we couldn't issue the invoice within the prescribed limit. Then we have to go back to the date of rendering of services. That is, we go back to the first month, that is the 20th of month 1, and time of supply happens on 20th of month 1, being the date of provision of service. Okay, I hope it is clear. And if the above two methods are not applicable, then the date on which it is recorded in the books of account shall be the date of time of supply. Now, where the recipient is liable to pay tax under RCM, then earliest of the following, the date on which the payment is made, or the date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of invoice by the supplier. Please remember, it is not the date in which the invoices are raised by the supplier, but only the date on which the payment is made, the liability to pay tax arises in the case of reverse charge supply. For example, a particular service is received, for example, GTA service is received in month 1. We got an invoice from the supplier in month 1, but the payment for that service is made only in month 2. Time of supply will arise only in month 2. And assume that we are not making the payment. In month 2 we didn't pay. Month 3 we didn't pay. Can we defer the time of supply to that indefinitely, simply because we are not paying the amount? We defer the payment? No. From the date of issue of invoice by the supplier, the date on which 60 days elapse, on that date the time of supply will arise if the payment is not made within that time. And here again that explanation is there, that the payment date means the date on which it is entered in the books of accounts, or the date on which the payment is debited to his bank account, whichever is earlier. And where it is not possible to determine the time of supply as above, time of supply shall be date of entry in the books of accounts. And in the case of interest, late fee and penalty and all those things, the same provision is applicable in the case of goods. The same provision is applicable here also. The date on which the supplier receives such addition in value, the interest amount, that will be the time of supply. Now we are coming to section 14. Section 14 speaks about the time of supply. Assume that there is a change in rate. So we have seen three things which are relevant for considering the at what rate or the time of supply are the date of supply of goods or service, the date of issue of invoice, or date of receipt of payment. These are the three relevant things which have to be taken into consideration in determining the date, in determining the rate. In case if there is a change in rate with respect to a particular goods or service. For example, assume that the rate of GST in respect of a particular goods was 28% up to 30th of a particular month. 31st up to 31st March, it was 28%. Then the rate is reduced to 18% from the 1st April onwards. Can be happen. Many times the rate of goods or services may be changed by the government considering many factors, may increase or decrease. So in that situation, what rate should be applied? The supply may have happened earlier, invoice may be given after that date, or receipt may be, the date of receipt of the payment may be before or after that date. So what rate to be applied? 18% or 28%? The earlier date or after date? The rule here is this thing only. Consider these three factors: date of supply of goods or service, date of issue of invoice, date of receipt of payment. Of these three yardsticks, where the two of them come, before or after, time of supply will arise there only. Here, assume that the first instance is that assume that the date of supply of goods or services was before the change, before the rate of change. It was a service. We have enough time to issue invoice. How to issue invoice within 30 days only. So the services were rendered on 30th of March. And invoice was issued only in April, say 5th of April. And payment is received on 10th. What rate is to be applied? Rate which was applicable till at the time of date of supply of goods, or the rate applicable after March 31st. Since the two of these are coming after March 31st, that the date of issue of invoice and date of receipt of payment, the time of supply should have come after the date of change in rate. But between the date of issue of invoice and date of receipt of payment, whichever comes earlier shall be the time of supply. Date of issue of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Now case 2. For the date of supply of goods as well as the date of issue of invoice was prior to the date of change. But the payment is received after that. In this case, the time of supply will go to before the date of change of supply. Being two of these happens before. In determining the time of supply, the date of supply of goods or service has no relevance. It will be date of issue of invoice or time of supply. The time of supply shall be the date of issue of invoice in this case. Now the third case, date of supply of goods or service and date of receipt of payment happens before, but the invoices are issued after the date of change in rate. Here the time of supply will be date of receipt of payment. And in the next situation where the date of payment of invoice is before, date of issue of invoice is before, date of supply of goods or service and date of receipt of payment, both happens after the date of change in rate. Here, date of receipt of payment will be the time of supply. And where the date of issue of invoice and date of receipt of payment both happens before, and date of supply of goods alone happens after, whichever comes earlier, date of issue of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever comes earlier shall be the time of supply. So if these two are coming in one side, that is date of issue of invoice and date of receipt of payment, then whichever of these two comes earlier shall be the time of supply. Otherwise, date of issue of invoice or date of receipt of payment, which comes along with the date of supply of goods or service, shall be the time of supply. Hope it is clear. Here also, same thing, same logic, time of supply. Now let us come to the next topic, that is place of supply. Here also we have certain definitions which we have to take into consideration before going actually into the provisions. The recipient, what is the meaning of recipient? Let us look into that. Section 293 defines the recipient of supply of goods or supply of service or both means where consideration is payable for the supply of goods or service or both, the person who is liable to pay that consideration. That is the recipient. It is not the person who received the goods or the person who received the service, but the person who is liable to pay that consideration is the recipient. As per the contract, who is liable to pay the consideration? he is called the recipient. That is the first consideration. Then, if no consideration is payable for the supply of goods, then only we have to look into the person to whom the goods are delivered or to whom the goods are made available or to whom or the possession or the use of good or the use of the goods to whom the is given or made available shall be the recipient. First instance, the person who is, if consideration is there, then the person who is liable to pay the consideration. Please note, it is not that the person who is paying the consideration, but who is liable to pay the consideration, that is the recipient, as per the contract. And if there is no consideration in the case of supply of goods, then the person to whom the goods are delivered or made available, etc. And if no consideration is there in the case of supply of service, the person to whom the service is rendered. So, normally we have the tendency to presume that the recipient means recipient of goods or recipient of service means the person who receive physically the goods or the person who receive the service. But GST law clearly says that it is not so. If consideration is there in the agreement, the consideration is payable for the supply of goods or services, then the person who is liable to pay the consideration is the recipient of goods or services. Please note that. Now we come to the place of supply of goods. Place of supply of goods, we have to see it in two sections, section 10 and section 11. Before going into that, actually, do you know what is the purpose of this place of supply? Place of supply, you can see it in integrated in IGST actually. It is not there when I am saying that it is there in section 10, 11, etc. See, it is not in the CGST Act. You can see the place of supply provisions in the IGST Act only. Till now, we have been speaking about the time of supply, the time within which the invoice are to be issued. Everything was from CGST Act. From now onwards, the place of supply of goods, you can see it only in IGST. Why it is there in IGST only? In CGST, there is no relevance. The place of supply has no relevance at all. Because CGST and SGST speaks about the supplies within the state, within the union territory. And IGST means is applicable in cases where the supply is in not in intrastate supply but interstate supplies are there. Place of supply is there in IGST Act to determine whether a supply is intrastate supply or interstate supply. If the location of the supplier as well as the place of supply are within the same state, then it is an intrastate supply. If the location of the supplier and the place of supply are within the same state, then it is an intrastate supply. If the place of supply and the location of the supplier are not in the same state, it is called interstate supply. Even if the location of the supplier and the place of supply are within the same state, but These are, one of them is in or one of them is in SEZ, then it is an interstate supply. In a special economic zone, that is the supplier or the place of supply is in a special economic zone, then it is an interstate supply. Or if the place of supply and the location of the supplier are in different states or in one state and in another union territory, are not in the same state, then it is interstate supply. So, place of supply has relevance in determining what is the nature of supply, whether it is an interstate supply or an intrastate supply. If it is an intrastate supply, what is the tax to be charged? CGST plus SGST. If the supply is an interstate supply, then what is the tax that is to be charged? IGST. So, place of supply is very, very important. For each transaction, we have to determine the place of supply. Each transaction, we have to determine the place of supply to determine what tax is to be charged in respect of that supply. So, in every invoice, there is a field to note the place of supply. Because if the location of the supplier and the place of supply are not within the same state, then IGST is to be charged. Otherwise, CGST is to be charged. So each invoice, we have to specify what is the place of supply. Now let us come to, and the place of supply rules. Different rules are there for goods and different services. And rules are different. Section 10 and 11 are the two sections which speaks about the place of supply of goods. And section 10 speaks about the place of supply of goods where the supply is other than import or import into or export from India. If the supply is within India, section 10 will say we have to look into section 10 to determine the place of supply. Section 10(1)(a) says that when the supply involves movement of goods, whether by the supplier or the recipient or by any other person, place of supply shall be the location of the goods at the time at which the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. Where the supply involves movement of goods, there is in pursuance of supply, there is movement of goods from one place to another. A supply goods to B. Because of that supply, goods are to be moved from the location of A to the location of B. There is movement of goods in pursuance of the supply. In that case, place of supply shall be the location of the goods at the time at which the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient, where the movement terminates. For example, A&M company in Chennai supply goods to B&M company in Kochi. What is the place of supply? In pursuance of that sale, goods are to be moved from Chennai to Kochi. And that movement will terminate at Kochi. So the place of supply is Kochi. Where is the location of the supplier? Chennai. Where is the place of supply? Kochi. These are in two states. So it is an interstate supply. Okay. Now 10(1)(b) says that where the goods are delivered by the supplier to a recipient or any other person on the direction of a third person. when this direction is given before or during the movement of goods. In that case, shall be deemed that that third person has received the goods and the place of supply shall be the principal place of business of such a person. Such a person means the third person. For example, A&M company in Kochi makes an order with B&M company to purchase certain goods. But A&M company, before the movement starts or during the course of the movement of goods, gives an instruction to deliver the goods to C&M company at Bangalore. Okay. So goods are not, the purchases are made by A&M company. A&M company ordered the goods, purchased it from B&M company at Chennai, but gives an instruction to supply the goods directly to C&M company at Chennai. Okay. So B&M company will raise an invoice. Here it says that the place of supply shall be the principal place of business of A&M company. The principal place of business of A&M company. So B&M company will raise an invoice to A&M company. But the goods are moved from B&M company directly to C&M company, the customer of A&M company. So after receiving the invoice from B&M company, A&M company will raise another tax invoice to C&M company. This is a particular transaction where a single transaction triggers two supplies. There is a supply from B&M company to A&M company and then another supply from A&M company to C&M company. Regarding the first supply is concerned, as far as B&M company, the supply made by B&M company is concerned, the place of supply is the principal place of business of A&M company. It is not that since the goods are moved from B&M company to C&M company is C&M company the place of supply? No. Here the place of supply is the principal place of business of A&M company by virtue of section 10(1)(b). Why can't you apply 10(1)(a) here? Can you apply 10(1)(a) here? No, it is not possible because the goods are not delivered to the recipient. If you go into the earlier provision, you could see that the condition there is that the place of supply shall be the location of the goods at the time at which the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. Here, who is the recipient here in our example? A&M company, because A&M company is the person who is going to pay the consideration. He is the person who is liable to pay the consideration because the agreement is between A&M company and B&M company. So the goods are not received by the recipient. The goods are not delivered to the recipient. So 10(1)(a) cannot be applied in this particular example. So 10(1)(b) alone should be applied here. And by 10(1)(b), the principal place of business of A&M company will be the place of supply. And 10(1)(c) says that where the supply does not involve movement of goods, whether by the supplier or the recipient, place of supply shall be the location of such goods at the time of the delivery to the recipient. Where the goods are there. If the goods are located at Kochi, then the place of supply shall, there is no movement of goods. The goods shall remain in Kochi itself. Even in pursuance of the supply, there is no movement of goods. So the place of supply shall be Kochi itself. Now if we are going into section 10(1)(d) where the goods are assembled or installed at site, A&N company from Kochi makes an order with the B&N company in Bangalore, but the goods are to be installed in Bangalore itself. B&N company need not send the goods to the location of A&N company, but the goods are to be installed or assembled at the customer's place in Bangalore itself. Then the place of such installation or assembly shall be the place of supply. And 10(1)(e) says that where the goods are supplied on board a conveyance, including a vessel, aircraft, a train, or a motor vehicle, place of supply shall be the location at which such goods are taken on board. Where the goods are taken on board. If the goods are taken on board from Kochi, then the place of supply shall be Kochi. Even if the vessel is coming from Sri Lanka, even if the aircraft is coming from, say, Singapore, the goods are taken on board from Kochi, then the place of supply shall be Kochi only. The aircraft may be going to Dubai or going to some other place, Mumbai, wherever it is going, from wherever it is coming, no, nothing doing. The place of supply shall be the location at which such goods are taken on board. Now, place of supply of goods if imported into or exported from India. If the goods are imported into India, the place of supply shall be the location of the importer. If the goods are imported from Malaysia, goods are imported from USA, the goods are imported from Dubai, wherever the goods are imported, if the location of the importer is in Kochi, the place of supply shall be Kochi. If the goods are imported into Mumbai, then the Mumbai shall be the place of supply. Assume that the importer, the person and the person who is importing, but it is imported at not at the Kochi port, but at Mumbai port. Where shall be the place of supply? Mumbai or Kochi? It will be in Kochi only, because the location of the importer, not the location where the goods are imported, but the location of the importer shall be the relevant place of shall be the relevant location of the place of supply. Now 11(b) says that goods exported from India, place of supply shall be the location outside India. The location outside India shall be the goods exported from India, then location outside India shall be the place of supply. That's all with the place of supply of goods. Now let us come to the place of supply in the case of services. We have two sections, section 12 and section 13. Section 12 speaks about where the location of the supplier and the recipient both are in India. Supplier as well as the recipient. Both are in India. Then in order to find out the place of supply, we have to refer section 12. If any one of these two, that is the location of the supplier or location of the recipient, is outside India, in that case, in order to find out or determine the place of supply, we have to refer section 13. Please consider the difference. We have two sections, section 12 and section 13 of IGST Act, which speaks about the place of supply of services. If the location of the recipient as well as the location of the supplier are within India, then we have to look into section 12. If any one of these two, that is the location of the supplier or location of the recipient, is outside India, we have to look into section 13 to determine the place of supply. Now first we will consider section 12. Section 12(1) says that time of supply will arise or the liability to pay tax is to be determined on the basis of time of supply, which is to be determined on the basis of the provisions of section 12. Now section 12.2 says that if service is made to a registered person, this is the general rule. Section 12.2, this is the general rule regarding the determination of place of supply of services. If services are made to a registered person, then place of supply shall be location of such a person. If place of supply, the services are made not to a registered person, and recipient's address on record exists, then the place of supply shall be location of the recipient. And the services are made to an unregistered person whose address on record does not exist, then the place of supply shall be the location of the supplier. This is the general rule. For an example, I'm a chartered accountant practicing. To one of my clients, I give some service. He is a registered person. He is a registered person. He is registered in Kerala. Then place of supply shall be Kerala. He is a person from Mumbai. I give service to him. He is a registered person, but registered in Maharashtra. I am from here in Kochi. I am practicing in Kochi. I give service to him in Maharashtra. Where is the place of supply? Place of supply is in Maharashtra. Where is my location? I am the supplier. My location is in Kochi, Kerala. So I have to raise an IGST bill. Interstate supply. I have to raise an IGST bill. Assume that my client is from Maharashtra, but he is not a registered person. He is not a registered person. I am providing service from here. I have his address with me. He is my regular client. I have his address with me. In my record, his address is there. I know he is from Maharashtra. So I will raise, but where is the place of supply? Location of the recipient, Maharashtra. So I will raise an IGST bill. And now assume that the person to whom I provide service is a new person. I'm doing some attestation work to him. He just came here in my office. He is not ready to give his address to me. His address is not available to me. In my record, his address does not exist. So where is the place of supply? Place of supply shall be in Kochi, where the supplier is located. Location of the supplier, my location is Kochi. I am the supplier. So where is the place of supply? Kochi. I have to write, though he may be from Delhi, he may be from Mumbai, I don't know. So I will raise a CGST, SGST bill because the place of supply is in Kerala. Location of the supplier, same state. It is an intrastate supply. Hope it is clear. Now, we are now coming into specific situations where the general rule is not applicable. Situations where the general rule is not applicable. In case of certain supplies which are directly related to immovable property related services, the place of supply shall be location of the immovable property. Supply of service directly in relation to immovable property. A list of services are here provided: architect service, interior decorator, surveyor, engineers and other related aspects, or estate agents. Any service provided by way of grant or right to use immovable property for carrying out coordination of construction work, etc. Services which are directly related to the immovable property. Place of supply is the location of the immovable property. So, architect is located in Kochi. He is giving his architectural service to an immovable property at Chennai. An immovable property at Chennai. Architect's place is here. The company which construct the building in Chennai is also located in Kochi itself, assume. So he will be raising the invoice to whom? The person in Kochi. So invoice address is Kochi address only. Where is the place of supply? But place of supply shall be Chennai, because the building or the immovable property is located at Chennai. He has to raise an IGST bill. The place of supply and location of the supplier are in different states. Though the recipient and the supplier are in the same state, in this case, the place of supply is in a different state, and so it is an interstate supply. And IGST is to be charged on the bill. In the case of lodging and accommodation in a hotel, guest house, homestay, etc., then also the place of supply shall be the location of the immovable property. So, I am a registered person, but registered in Kerala. I am going to Bangalore for some audit purposes. I am staying there in a hotel in Bangalore. What type of a bill I will get from the hotel? I will get what is the place of supply now? The place of supply is in Bangalore. So, I will get a CGST, SGST bill of Bangalore. And I will not be in a position to take input tax credit on that, because I am not getting an IGST bill. So, here also the place of supply will be the location of the immovable property. And any services by way of accommodation in any immovable property, for these purposes, again, the place of supply is the location of the immovable property. And any ancillary services, ancillary to the services referred to in clause A, B, and C, any ancillary service, again, the location of the immovable property shall be the place of supply. And now, so we have seen one rule which is different from the general one. In the case of immovable property, services related to immovable property. Now we are going to see some other services also. The next one under section 12(4) says that a restaurant or catering service, personal grooming, fitness, beauty treatment, health service, including cosmetic and plastic surgery, place of supply shall be the location where the services are actually performed. So there is a beauty clinic in Kochi. Somebody from Delhi came here and undergo the beauty treatment here or health service here. The place of supply shall be in Kerala only. The beauty clinic in Kochi will issue a CGST, SGST bill because the place of supply is in Kochi. As far as the general rule is concerned, which would have been the place of supply? The place of supply, as per the general rule, is that if the person is a registered person, then the location of the recipient, the location of that registered person would have been the place of supply. But in this particular type of services, In the case of restaurant and catering service, personal grooming, fitness, beauty treatment, and health service, the place of supply shall be the location where the services are actually performed. And training and performance appraisal service in relation to training and performance appraisal to a registered person, location of the registered person. Other than a registered person, location where the services are actually performed. You see, both are here. If the service is in relation to training or performance appraisal is made to a registered person, then the general rule, similar to the general rule, the location of the registered person shall be the place of supply. If it is not to a registered person, other than a registered person, location where the services are actually performed shall be the place of supply. Assume that I am a chartered accountant having registration in Kerala, in Kochi. I'm going to Bangalore and I'm going to Bangalore and I conduct a training program there. A number of participants are there from Bangalore. Various companies are there. Send their employees to the. What shall supply? Place of supply shall be the location of the registered person. If the companies are registered and the companies send their employees, they have the contract with me. They send their employees. They are liable to pay the consideration. So they are I'm giving supply to a registered person. The place of supply shall be Bangalore if they are from Bangalore. So I will issue an invoice from Kochi to Bangalore, IGST invoice. Assume that there was a company located in Coimbatore. Send their person to Bangalore. So where shall be the place of supply? The company is registered in Coimbatore. So the place of supply shall be Coimbatore. I will again raise an invoice, but the place of supply will be not Bangalore, but Tamil Nadu, Coimbatore. Now there are certain persons who are unregistered persons. Somebody from Kochi came with me to attend that training program which I conducted in Bangalore. What type of bill I will raise with them? What is the place of supply? Place of supply shall be the location where the services are actually performed. So Bangalore is the place of supply. Though they are located in Kochi, since they are unregistered persons, the place of supply will be Bangalore, and I will raise an IGST bill to them, showing place of supply as Bangalore. Hope it is clear. And in the case of admission of events, the place of supply service provided by way of admission to a cultural, artistic, sporting, scientific, educational, entertainment event, amusement park, or any other place and service ancillary thereto shall be the place where the event is actually held, or where the park or such other place is located. So, an event is conducted at Chennai, I am the person located in Kochi. Event is conducted at Chennai. Say educational or entertainment event, a cultural or artistic event I am conducting there in Chennai. I am issuing tickets. The services in the form of admission to such event. What shall be the place of supply? Place of supply, irrespective of whether they are registered or unregistered, nothing. The place where the event is conducted shall be the place of supply. Similar to the immovable property related service. And now organization of a cultural or artistic event or service is ancillary to organization of any of such events. For example, I am located a company located in Kochi, AN company, as an event management company in Bangalore to organize an event for me. So the service or invoices that the event management company raises to me, what is the service they provide to me? The company in Kochi, organizing a cultural or artistic or sporting or like event. In that case, the place of supply, if it is to a registered person, location of the registered person, otherwise to an unregistered person, place where the event is actually held. And if the event is actually held in outside India, the place of supply shall be the location of the recipient. See, if the event is held outside India, not in India, in that case, even if it is an unregistered person, then the place of supply shall be the location of the recipient. The recipient is in India. The recipient is not outside India. Why? Because we are speaking about section 12. In case of section 12, both the recipient as well as the provider of service are in India. Here, receiver as well as the provider is in India, but the particular event is held by the recipient in outside India. In that case, the place of supply shall not be outside India, but the location of the recipient shall be treated as the place of supply. And section 12 says that services by way of transportation of goods to a registered person, location of the registered person, and to other than a registered person, the location at which the goods are handed over for the transportation. If an company in Kochi engage a goods transporting agent to transport the goods from Bangalore to Kochi, if an company is a registered person, the place of supply shall be Kochi. If an company is not a registered person, the place of supply shall be Bangalore, because the location at which such goods are handed over for the transportation is Bangalore. So Bangalore is in that case, if an company is not a registered person, then Bangalore will be the place of supply. And again, here also provided that where the transportation of goods is to a place outside India, the place of supply shall be the place of destination of such goods. Okay, both A and B are in India. A is transporting the goods. The contract is between A and B, but the goods are to be transported to Nepal, outside India. So the place of supply in that case will be not the location of the person, recipient, but the destination of such goods. Assume that he is a registered person. Both A and B are B is a registered person. In that case, the location of the registered person always, whatever be the destination, not relevant. Now, passenger transportation. Here also similar provision is there. Location of the to a registered person, the location of the registered person. Otherwise, the places where the passenger embarks on the conveyance for a continuous journey, where he embarks. And now the place of supply service on board conveyance, including a vessel, aircraft, train, or motor vehicle, shall be the location of the first scheduled point of departure of that conveyance for the journey. There is a little difference between the service and goods. In the case of goods, what was the place of supply? The place of supply was the place where the goods are boarded into the vessel. Whereas in the case of service, the place of supply shall be the location of the first scheduled point of departure of that conveyance of the journey. For example, the aircraft starts its fly from Sri Lanka, reaches Kochi. The services are provided from Kochi alone, and it's moved to Dubai. Where is the place of supply? Place of supply shall be Sri Lanka, being the location, the first scheduled point of departure of that conveyance for the journey. Okay. And in the case of telecom service, this is the rule. If it is fixed line or mobile connection, if it is fixed line, place of installation shall be the place of supply. If it is mobile connection, you have to check whether it is postpaid or prepaid. If it is postpaid, address on record of the customer. If it is prepaid, whether voucher is sold other than online, then the place of sale of voucher. If it is online voucher, then address on record of customer. It shall be the place of supply. Banking, insurance. I'm keeping the this slide here. And now we have section 13. In section 13, it's almost similar to the provisions under section 12, almost the same, but this is applicable. We know section 13 is applicable in situations where one of the person, either the supplier or the recipient, is outside India. Either the supplier or the recipient is outside India, we have to look into section 13. The general rule is that the place of supply of service, except to this 3 to 13, shall be location of the recipient of service. And where the location of the recipient of service is not available in the ordinary course of business, the place of supply shall be the location of the supplier of service. This is the general rule. Now I want to, almost the same provisions are in all other. There is only one section which I like to request your attention. This is service of bank company intermediary or hiring by means of transport. This is intermediary service, important one. The place of supply of the following services shall be location of the supplier of service. See, general rule is the location of the recipient of service. In this 13 names, if one of the person, for example, the services are provided by an intermediary service, location of the intermediary is in India and the supplier is outside India. The meaning of intermediary means a broker, an agent, or any other person by whatever name called who arranges or facilitates supply of goods or service or both or securities between two or more persons, but does not include a person who supplies such goods or service or both securities on his own account. There is a foreign company. For that foreign company, here we have an agent. Foreign company wants some goods are to be purchased from here. For facilitating the purchase of the goods, the agent here represent the foreign company and do all the activities here. But the goods shall be directly exported to the foreign company. The person who is acting here as agent, he will get a commission for whatever service he is doing. Or the foreign company import goods here and it supplies to various customers. The locating the customer and various other services on behalf of the foreign company shall be carried on by the intermediary here, the agent here. He will get a commission from the foreign company. In this case, though he is getting foreign currency from a foreign company, his service is not a exported service. Why? Because the place of supply in that situation is the location of in the case of intermediary service, place of supply is the location of the supplier itself. So India itself shall be the place of supply, and so it is not an exporter service, and GST shall be applicable for that transaction. I think almost similar same provisions are there. Similar to section 12 is there here also. With this, we conclude the provisions for time of supply and place of supply. Any queries, any doubts, any clarification required? We can use the balance time for that purpose. Chat box, if you can communicate through chat box. Okay. Some questions here.
So do you want me to read it out for you?
Yeah.
Okay, sir. So one question is, if a person in Kochi orders a person in Chennai to deliver goods and also asks the seller to hand over the goods to his friend at Chennai, who will deliver the goods to Kochi, which is the place of supply?
In that case, the person who ordered the goods is in Kochi, and he enter into an agreement with a person in Chennai to deliver the goods in Chennai itself. So for the first transaction between the person in Chennai and between the person in Kochi, it is an interstate supply because the place of supply is in Kochi. The place of supply is in Kochi.
All right, sir.
Okay.
All right, sir. There's a couple of other questions also.
Okay.
Yes. Sir, suppose the location of the supplier is in Mumbai and location of the recipient is in Tamil Nadu, but the goods are assembled and installed at Kochi. In this case, what is the place of supply? This is subject to IGST or CGST and SGST?
It is really the supplier's location. The supplier's location is in Mumbai, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Supplier's location is in Mumbai. But the place of supply is the third 10(1)(c), which says that the location of where the goods are installed. The goods are installed in a different place. So the place of supply is the goods where it is installed.
Okay.
And since the place of supply is in Kochi and the location of the supplier is in Mumbai, the IGST bill is to be raised, but place of supply is in Kochi. This is mainly because GST is the reasoning behind here is the GST is a supply on destination based tax. So where the goods are consumed, the goods are that state will get the tax. Here the goods are consumed in Kochi. It is installed in Kochi. So the goods are consumed in Kochi. So the place of supply to be in Kochi so that the government of Kerala should get the money, put the tax. That is the reasoning behind that.
All right, sir. So there's another question. What is the place of supply in the cases of OIDAR services, online information database access and retrieval?
Okay. In case of database access and retrieval and access service, the place of supply shall be the place where the supplier is located. If it is given to one understood person, the place where the supplier is located. The place where the supplier is located, because if it is from Kochi, then Kochi will be the place of supply, and CGST, SGST is to be charged. It is there, but I didn't cover it because of paucity of time.
All right, sir.
It is there in that slide. It is there. Yeah.
So I think that's all the questions that we have.
Yeah, this is that provision. Okay. Online information and database access retrieval service. The place of supply of online information and database access retrieval service shall be location of the recipient of service. Yeah. Sorry, I thought it is a supplier's location. Sorry, it is actually location of the recipient.
All right, sir.
Okay. Location of the recipient. Sorry?
Would you like to add anything else, or are you?
It's all. That's all.
All right, sir. So
Next,
thank you very much.
Next slide. Just take that next slide also.
So we can't see the screen you're sharing.
Okay. It is actually receiver's location of the receiver. Location of the recipient. Location of the recipient. Case of online database access service, retrieval service.
So we have another question. If you can give an example of advertisement services by government?
Advertisement service by government.
Yes.
It is there. You want to see the slide also? I will share it. Able to see the slide now?
I think it's loading, sir. Yes.
This is advertisement service to government. The place of supply of advertisement service to the central government, state government, statutory body or local authority meant for state or union territories identified in the contract or agreement shall be taken as being in each of such state or union territory. And the value of such a supply specific to each such state or union territory shall be in proportion to the amount attributable to the service provided by way of dissemination in the respective state. That means if there is a single contract for a number of locations with the central government or state government or statutory bodies for different states together, proportionate amount shall be taken for the place of supply for each such state. That's all. Next one.
So next question is what is the time of supply in case of installment payment for purchasing flats, apartments?
The case of apartments, in the case of apartments, it is a continuous supply of service. It's a continuous supply of service. So if periodic payments are there, before the periodic payments are made, invoices are required to be issued. We have to look into the contract. if the contract says that some kind of periodic payments on the, or it is linked to the stage wise, then before the due date of payment, invoice is to be issued. So that is the time limit for issue of invoice depends on the contract. And then at the time of payment or at the time of issue of invoice, whichever comes earlier shall be the time of supply. So even if the invoices are not given, money is issued, money is paid, at that time of supply will arise. If invoices are raised but money is not paid, then again at the time of raising invoice, the time of supply will arise.
So again, another question: is there a default provision for place of supply? Is there a default provision for place of supply?
External default provisions, huh?
Yes. Is there a default provision for place of supply? That's the question.
Can that particular person can explain whether what you mean by default provision?
Raju, could you unmute Sangeeta in so that she can ask?
Default provision for place of supply?
Yes, that's the question. We'll just wait for a minute to hear from her again.
Okay, okay.
Raju, can you unmute?
Hello, sir. Sangeeta madamine unmute ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല. മാഡത്തിന്റെ മൈക്ക് സിസ്റ്റം കറക്റ്റ് അല്ലാന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു. ഇവിടെ unmute ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല.
Default provision, you mean if the place of supply is not correct, what will happen? Is it like that? The place of supply, if the place of supply is not correct, in the invoice you have to mention the place of supply. If the place of supply is not correct, there is chances that IGST and CGST taxes the interstate or intrastate supply, whether it is, and also the state at which the place of supply is to be shown in the return. All those things may not be correct in your return, and tax may be asked by the department later on for the mistakes. And all the interest, tax, interest, as well as penalty, all the provisions may happen.
So she's asked section 12 is not applicable. Yes, she's asking.
Section
12. Is it applicable or not?
Is it applicable?
It's a follow-up question by the same person, Sangeeta madam. Is section 12 not applicable?
Section 12 is applicable in cases where section 12 as far as IGST is concerned is for place of supply in the case of both the recipient as well as the supplier of services are located in India. How to determine the place of supply? If both of them are in India, section 12 will be applicable. If one among them, that is the supplier or the recipient of service, is located outside India, in that situation, section 12 will not be applicable.
So one more question: what is the place of supply in case of recharge of prepaid mobile service from outside the state, but the number is registered in another state?
Number is registered
in another state.
Go back to that slide. is mobile connection postpaid? Is it so or prepaid?
The question was prepaid, sir. Prepaid.
Prepaid. Then if the voucher is sold other than online, not online, but other than online, the place of sale of voucher. From where it is registered is not relevant. From which state it is registered is not relevant. From where the voucher is charged. That is, if it is in a place outside India, other than online, then from which place it is charged, that shall be the place of supply. If it is charged online, in that case, address on record of the customer shall be the place of supply. You have purchased some recharge voucher from another state, then that state shall be the place of supply. But if you are charging it through online voucher, then what is the address on record of the person registered in a particular state? That will be the place of supply. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I think that's it, sir. There are no other questions for you.
Okay.
So
Okay,
thank you very much, Cyrjoe, sir. So you were saying something?
Okay, thank you to all for having with me all this time. And thank you to the institute. Thank you, Alan, for being with us. Thank you to the institute and also to the university for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Cyrjoe, sir. As expected, this session had the same quality we've come to expect from you over the years. Given the time available, your coverage was very detailed. Thank you also for responding to specific questions by the participants. I'd also like to thank our participants. Our session tomorrow will be taken by CA Soman NL. Soman sir will be covering input tax credit, eligibility conditions, apportionment of credit and block credits, and also on reversal of credits, return filing, and payment of taxes. We look forward to having you all tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you all to Cyrjoe sir once again, and thank you to all the participants. Thank you.